Okay.
Yes, let's start letting people in. And we should start recording if we haven't started recording already.
You're recording.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So we've established quorum. I'm going to do roll call. If you can please say your name so we can capture it on the record. Community Board 1.
Good morning, this is Tammy Meltzer from Community Board 1.
Community Board 2. Community Board 3. Community Board 4. Community Board 5 is not showing up. The others may show up late. But I got a message this morning. Community Board 6.
Good morning, Kyle Athiad from Community Board 6.
Community Board 7.
Morning, Stephen Brown, Chair, present.
Community Board 8.
Morning, it's Russell Squire.
Community Board 9. Community Board 10.
Good morning, everyone. Cicely Harris.
Good morning. Community Board 11.
Good morning, No Sarama Chair, Community Board 11.
Good morning, Xavier Santiago, Vice Chair, Community Board 11.
Community Board 12. Okay. Having established quorum, do I have a motion to accept the agenda for today's minutes?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second,
As stated in the agenda, the minutes will be sent out later this week. And so we'll be voting on that next month. So we can move on now to the presentation by the Mitchell-Lama United Coalition. And I turn it over to you. Here's Richard Heitler. And if you can introduce your team and start the presentation.
Yeah, hi, everybody. First of all, thank you for allowing us to make this presentation. I'm here with Andrea. Missing is Warren Harding, who's actually the chairman of the steering committee for Mitchell-Lama United, but will pitch in and do his sections of the presentation. Next slide. Mitchell-Lama United is a coalition of 3 citywide organizations, and we are trying to preserve and protect and enhance Mitchell-Lama development citywide through activism and a legislative agenda, which we will be talking about this morning. Next slide. Actually, Andrea, in the interest of time, we have to abbreviate this PowerPoint presentation. We will be sending it to you as a PDF file, complete with all the notes and all the images, along with our white paper, which describes our legislative agenda in Albany. But right now, we're going to fly through it just to give you an idea of what's in it and an incentive to possibly read it. So, Andrea, please skip to slide 8. This is a familiar looking ad. You've all seen it. It is Exhibit A in our case about what's so great about Mitchell-Lama and why Mitchell-Lama is the best housing program for New York's working families that the state of New York ever invented. It has 3 kinds of information: monthly cost, purchase price, and income eligibility guidelines, all of which I will be talking about in my section of the presentation next. In case you couldn't read the fine print, take a look at the monthly costs for Rosalie Manning and compare them with Stuyvesant Town, which used to be able to house working families in New York City and has now been converted to market rate. Next slide. The same is true of purchase price. This is what it costs to buy into Rosalie Manning, a beautiful co-op in Yorkville, in an area where the average apartment purchase price in a co-op is hovering around $1 million. Next. We have a long presentation about how Mitchell-Lama works called What's So Great About Mitchell-Lama, and it explains how these terrific financial results are obtained. It's available to you if you want it on request. Just take a look at these 6 bullet points. 4 of them represent significant government investment. The surcharge is an interesting piece of social engineering that keeps people in their homes when they're doing a little better. And the 6th is not-for-profit operation. When you're in a Mitchell-Lama, it's a not-for-profit or Mitchell-Lama co-op, and that therefore you are assured that you will never pay more in monthly charges than what it actually costs to operate and maintain the building, your fair share of that. And when you go to sell, you will get back what you paid in. But there is no profit or no speculative appreciation on your capital. The biggest single government investment is in the form of a tax break, which I'll be talking about more later. Next slide. You'll often hear people say that Mitchell-Lama has no future. Sooner or later, they're all going to go private. And that is fundamentally not true. While we have lost almost 2/3 of the rentals, 90% of the co-ops have hung in there and is still in the program. And we want to keep it that way. This is a fight we can win, but it's a fight we all have to engage in. Next slide. Next slide. This is my favorite slide. It's the list of victories of Cooperators United for Mitchell-Lama. We've engaged in the fight against privatization and won. Mitchell-Lama United, which is one of the 3 constituent groups, CU4ML rather, which is one of the constituent groups of Mitchell-Lama United, provides information, technical support, and organizational support to groups of resident shareholders who are fighting the privatization battle, and we win more than we lose. And in fact, in many of these cases, the group of activists has gone on and in 1 or 2 or 3 election cycles has taken over the board. Next slide. We also have to acknowledge our defeats. Southbridge Towers is one that we lost. They went private in 2015, and 5 years later, I don't know how many of you know this out there, they are in serious financial distress. And this is not a secret. This is coming from their published reports, from their audits, from their treasurer. They are $7 million, a $7 million shortfall in the current budget, and to close the gap, they have imposed what they call an operating assessment. It's $4,000 per average apartment, and it has to be paid in over a 5-year period for reasons I can describe in the Q&A if you're interested in getting into the technical details. So $800 a month increase. And that's not the end of it. To close the gap next fiscal year, the treasurer is currently estimating a 40% maintenance increase. So how could something like this happen? Next slide. Everybody in the privatization debate admits that real estate taxes will significantly increase when a building goes from Mitchell-Lama to private market rate. But they say that revenues from flip taxes, that is charges, the co-op takes a percentage of the market rate sales price, that income from this source will be enough to close the gap. And what this graph shows that it wasn't. P.S. What's not on the graph is that when it was a Mitchell-Lama, Southbridge's annual real estate tax bill was 1.6 million. It went up to 8.3 in the first full year of privatization, and then went all the way up to 16 in the current year. And the other line that you can see is flip tax revenue, which shows the trend line is almost a slow decline. If you look over on the far right, you see the $7 million gap. Next slide. This is the big picture, not just the two line items of taxes and flip tax revenues, but total income and expense. And I put it up there to show that Southbridge went into deficit in 2017-18, well before the pandemic hit. It also, I have to talk about this. When a co-op goes into deficit, banks can decline to write mortgages to potential purchasers. Actually, they can't. It's against their underwriting guidelines. And if banks refuse to underwrite mortgages, the amount of $1 million sales you can have is somewhat limited, and it really slows down, if not entirely eliminates sales. And if there are no sales, there is no flip tax revenue, and then the whole house of cards collapses. which appears to be what is happening at Southbridge. Next slide. Southbridge is a tragedy that never should have happened. And even in our victories, we cannot continue, CU4ML and others, to fight the anti-privatization battle or the preservation of Mitchell-Lama battle one building at a time. Therefore, we've adopted a broader policy goal and a legislative agenda, which Andrea will describe to you.
Yeah, hi. So we do have a legislative agenda for Mitchell-Lama United, which is to make privatization harder and to ensure good governance in these buildings. And during the pandemic, we also would like to have a moratorium on privatization. These are some of the bills in brief. And this one raises the vote needed for every step of privatization.
Next slide.
And these are, sorry about that. I'm using two computers here. Sorry, we'll go to the next one. These are some of the good governance bills where this is about voting. And the next slide is about transparency, AKA sunshine laws for boards of directors in co-ops. And by the way, we have this white paper, which we will send to you, and you can read all about these bills in depth in the white paper. This one postpones privatization until we're no longer eligible for that lower shelter rent tax. And this is a charging a 75% transfer fee to go back to the city to pay for other affordable housing, as well as creating an ombudsman's office. And here's our moratorium bill. During a pandemic where really nobody knows which way is up, it's ridiculous to try to privatize and to try to predict the real estate market. And it's terrible for people who are living in cooperatives and who are already unsure about their employment, their health status, and they cannot make these decisions in the middle of a pandemic. So Dick's going to talk a little more now.
Okay, Article 2 to Article 11. We particularly wanted to bring this to your attention. This is not a state legislative issue. This is a New York City issue. Article 2, Article 11 refer to various sections of the private housing finance law. HPD came up with this and instituted this through a rule change. We think it's a disaster, but since HPD created it, HPD can fix it. And I particularly wanted the borough boards to be aware of that, because you may someday be called upon to approve one of these deals, and we think you shouldn't. Next slide. The other interesting thing here is that although HPD has been pushing this deal for 10 years, not a single co-op has taken them up on it. And it's not a matter of law or theory. The devil is in the details, or rather in the numbers. Okay, take a look at the next slide. We are using the example of Rosalie Manning, which is, as I said in the previous slide, is a co-op that fought the privatization battle, and one of those that went over and now has a unanimously pro-Mitchell-Lama 7-person board. They never needed a compromise, and yet HPD made them an offer and gave them a complete underwriting set for an Article 11 conversion. And these are the most recent numbers that we have. And look what happens to purchase price. It goes up anywhere between 10 and 19 times. Next slide. And because purchase price goes up, nobody could buy into the Article 11 version of Rosalie Manning without a mortgage. And when you add mortgage financing to the monthly maintenance, the monthly housing cost either quadruples or triples. Next slide. These are the incomes that are required to live in the Mitchell-Lama version of Rosalie Manning. The Mitchell-Lama numbers are taken straight from their lottery ad. And the Article 11 numbers are taken straight from the HPD, HDC underwriting. So as you can see, you need to be a lot wealthier in order to live in the Article 11 version of Rosalie Manning. Next slide. discussions of affordability tend to get very confused. We talk about AMI, percentage of AMI, nobody knows what we're talking about. So in order to put this on to give this a human face, we went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and got salary data for the kinds of people who actually live in Mitchell-Lama these days and put them up on this chart. And next slide, compared them to what it actually costs to live in a 2-bedroom unit at Rosalie Manning. And what you can see is, even if this was a 4-person household with one wage earner, all of them could afford to live in Rosalie Manning as a Mitchell-Lama. Next slide. None of them could afford to live in Rosalie Manning were it to convert to an Article 11. That's basically our case of what's wrong with 2 to 11. Next slide. Oh yeah, you've seen this ad. And one of the things that we like to talk about is how broad is the band of affordability. Next slide. You could live in Rosalie Manning as a Mitchell-Lama with an income anywhere between $24,000 and $148,000. That in housing wonk language, that's a band of affordability that is incredibly broad. Once you go to the Article 11 version of Rosalie Manning, you cut off the bottom 60% of that band of affordability. And you also make the co-ops available to people with much higher incomes. Now, next slide. The band of affordability, a broad band of affordability is good for diversity. A narrow band, less so. We took a look at salary data by ethnic group, and we found out that as a Mitchell-Lama, a broad band of people of color as well as white people can afford to live in Mitchell-Lama. Once you go to Article 11, virtually many more of the people of color are priced out. And this is not good housing policy. It's not good fair housing policy. And I'm going to pass the torch back to Andrea to pick it up from here.
So yeah, hi. So now we'll talk about fair housing. And fair housing is that everybody should be able to choose where they want to live, free from discrimination. And as we all know, this is not currently the case. There's all kinds of discriminatory practices that go on. And in addition, there's been a history of deliberate disinvestment in communities of color by government and industry, namely through practices like redlining. So the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968, spurred by the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And its dual purpose was both to end these practices and also to reverse the kinds of segregation that the practices had brought about. AFFH is a part of the Fair Housing Act, and it's known as Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing. And it's a mandate. It was strengthened by Obama, dismantled by Trump, and is now being reapplied by the Biden administration. And this requires municipalities who receive HUD funding to show that they're successfully taking steps to undo these longstanding patterns of segregation. And a policy or practice is said to have a disparate impact when it has a discriminatory effect, regardless of whether there was any intention to discriminate. And that would be a discriminatory effect on a protected class. So the Mitchell-Lama housing program embodies fair housing principles. And if we destroy it through privatization or 2 to 11, that's only going to exacerbate the segregation. So as Dick has shown you, the 2 to 11 policy cuts out the lower 2/3 of the Mitchell-Lama eligibility band. And because of the income disparity in New York City and generally, what it does is have a disparate impact on people of color and other people in protected classes. So HPD has not only enabled these conversions, but they've continually and actively encouraged them. And this is like in Rosalie Manning, most often, well, not in Rosalie Manning, but they've given them sort of most often in buildings which have already defeated privatization. So they don't need this compromise, the so-called compromise that they were originally sold as. And clearly the city and state need to be promoting policies that don't have a disparate impact and that don't cause more segregation. So this is in fact what they say they want to do, right? So here are these quotes. And what happened was, even while Trump was undoing AFFH, many municipalities vowed to uphold it. And New York State's effort is called Fair Housing Matters. And what they aim to do is address the root causes of segregation. And you can also see that they understand that segregation causes inequities beyond living situation in access to employment, education, and quality healthcare, and many, many other things. And here's the city's plan, the Where We Live New York plan. And likewise, you can see from their quote that they get that the lack of affordable housing disproportionately affects people of color, people with disabilities, and other protected classes. But this pushing of 2 to 11 conversions flies in the face of everything the city claims it's trying to do in its affirmatively furthering fair housing initiative, and is frankly hypocritical, because these conversions will have a discriminatory effect on protected classes, and especially on non-white New Yorkers, very few of whom will be able to afford the converted apartments. And the original Mitchell-Lama law did not have a buyout provision. It was the Rockefeller Amendment, which enabled privatization, and that also had a disparate impact on people of color. And that's why Mitchell-Lama United would like to restore the law to its original 1955 form. So if New York City really wanted to fight residential segregation, they need look no further than the Mitchell-Lama housing program. Mitchell-Lama housing is diverse. Mitchell-Lama housing is affordable. Mitchell-Lama housing is accessible to disabled people. Mitchell-Lama housing co-ops contribute to housing stability and neighborhood stability. Mitchell-Lama housing is accessed via government supervised waiting lists. Under normal operation, these preclude the rampant discriminatory practices in market and other housing models. And Mitchell-Lama housing cooperators are owners, and they have autonomy over their living conditions. And Mitchell-Lama housing developments are often NORCs, where seniors can age in place. So Mitchell-Lama has been this integrated housing that New York City and state insist they want. So the city and state are on record with saying they'll take affirmative steps to desegregate, but to actually affirmatively desegregate, they need to stop talking and start investing in the kinds of programs like Mitchell-Lama that embody the city they say they wish to create. They need to take substantive legislative and regulatory action to prevent privatization in 2 to 11. But in order to fulfill the mandate of AFFH, the city and state need to go further. No new Mitchell-Lamas have been built since the 70s. This needs to change. Mitchell-Lama is a proven, successful model for integrating New York, and Mitchell-Lama 2.0 is an idea whose time has come. And there are many options for making it work: converting failed luxury buildings, using land trusts, and another terrific option would be to give Mitchell-Lama rental tenants the right to convert their developments to Mitchell-Lama co-ops when their landlords want to privatize. So having a robust initiative to build new Mitchell-Lamas and protecting the old ones would demonstrate a commitment to actions and that will move the city and state towards their clearly stated goals of eradicating the devastating inequities that accompany New York City's longstanding patterns of segregated housing.
Next slide.
There it is.
And were Warren here, he would tell you that our legislative agenda, which you can read about in the white paper, we actually have sponsors and powerful legislative leaders who are sponsoring our bills in Albany, both in the Assembly and the legislature. We think that there has never been a better political environment to push these laws, at least in my adult lifetime. So we're serious about it. We're looking for letters of support from the Manhattan Borough boards, which we have gotten from Brooklyn and Queens, I believe. And we're looking for, we'd also like to get the word out. We are willing to make presentations to individual community boards, especially those boards that have a lot of Mitchell-Lamas. And we would urge any of you as individuals, or if you live in a Mitchell-Lama as a collective, to join Mitchell-Lama United. I already saw something come up on the chat, people looking for links. We can provide those links to our website and all the information that you are receiving here this morning. So now it's the Q&A. Any questions out there?
Please raise your hand, either literally, I can see you, but preferably virtually.
Dick, it's Gail Brewer. I will say congratulations. I certainly support you, always have. One of the questions I have, I think I know how challenging Southbridge is. It was 10 votes. Very, very, that was probably one of the most frustrating days ever. I think one of the things you didn't mention, and maybe that's part of the transparency, is this proxy thing as to how people vote, or maybe you mentioned that. That's what happened at Southbridge. Is that part of your proxy issue, or did I miss that, Andrea?
No, you didn't miss it because we didn't say it. But in our good governance legislation, we have proposed reforms to proxy voting. We think that it is unnecessary in a Mitchell-Lama. For those of you not following in the weeds of this, New York State corporate law absolutely enforces proxy voting. You can't skip it, because if you own stock in Corning Glass Works, you shouldn't have to travel to Corning to vote in a stockholders meeting. But since every stockholder in a Mitchell-Lama co-op lives there and only has to take the elevator to the community room, there's no excuse for it. So we have a voting reform piece in our legislative package, Gail, which allows for absentee ballots and early voting, but forbids proxies.
Good, okay, that's what happened at Southbridge. And the second
And
question.
by the way, Gail, if we had raised the biggest piece of our legislative package is to raise the thresholds from 2/3 to 80%. And we didn't dream up if 80% had been the standard, Southbridge would still be in Mitchell-Lama. And we got the 80% standard, believe it or not, from HPD. When we want to create a limited equity co-op, we need to get support from 80% of the residents. So if 80% of the residents is the standard for creating a limited equity co-op, it certainly ought to be the standard for destroying one.
Okay, and the other question I have is just to get, how do we get more Mitchell-Lama housing? I know we've been talking about this for a long time. I know it's state, but that's a different discussion perhaps than the amazing ways of redoing. I mean, I have to survive, every day I'm dealing with trying to make sure that the people I know in the co-ops do not lose their emphasis on trying to deal with their neighbors. It's very hard to be in those co-ops and have fights with your neighbors over this, as you know, because I've been in that situation. My question though is, we would love to have more Mitchell-Lama housing, period, when people are talking about these distressed properties. So where are we with that? Because you may, thanks to Hallie Chu, who's on this call, you may not know, but we have our own white paper or whatever report on affordable housing. And we had a whole year of discussion about it. And one of the main proposals is distressed housing, hotels, and so on. Get them now while they are affordable. So how would those become Mitchell-Lamas? What would have to happen there?
Well, it's an interesting question because the Mitchell-Lama regular law is still on the books. Article 2 of the private housing finance law still exists. It's just that nobody's put any money into this program since when? 1975.
Right.
So it's actually a budget allocation. And then there is nothing, by the way, in Article 2, which would prevent Mitchell-Lamas from being created through rehabs. So underused hotels and commercial buildings could essentially be a site for Mitchell-Lamas. This is not currently part of our legislative agenda, but it is part of our advocacy work. We would love to see a Mitchell-Lama 2.0 fully funded. And we have other ideas for a Mitchell-Lama 2.0, which is no privatization provision, and they all need to be owned as co-ops or not-for-profit rentals.
Thank you very much. I'm 100,000% with you. As you know, I could go on forever. Others should ask questions.
Okay.
That's our problem, so can we. Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Gail, for the comments and also for all your past and future support.
Thank you.
So before I call on people, just a little bit of housekeeping. We've been joined by Jeffrey Lefrancois, the first vice chair of CB4, and we've been joined by the newly elected chair, Janine Kiley of CB2, and she has her hand up, to be followed by Stephen Brown from CB7 and Tammy Meltzer from CB1. Welcome, Jeannie.
Good morning. That was a great presentation. I just want to have a better understanding of where the support is politically at the state level for this agenda. And particularly which, where we can be most helpful in terms of, reaching out to different elected officials in our respective communities.
Okay, I might ask Andrea to help me out with this answer, but it's interesting. The 80% bill, for example, is sponsored by Linda Rosenthal in the Assembly, and believe it or not, by Brian Kavanaugh, who is chairman of the Housing Committee in the Senate. And all of our bills have sponsors, and all of our bills, I know, Janine, because I know my representatives. I'm in Community Board 3, and I know Brad Hoylman is on board, and so is Harvey Epstein. And Andrea keeps lists of everybody who's signed on and is a sponsor. And if your representatives have not, but we would love to talk to you so that we can jointly urge them to sign on.
Stephen Brown?
Two things. One was just a question and the other is a statement. The question was from the slide in which you talked about one of the drivers of the increase in cost was the taxes. Just curious about what are there other ones and what they would be? And then I'll just state that I'd love to get your contact information after this. I think it'd be something we would be interested in having you come to one of our meetings, but I'll leave with the question.
Well, Stephen, the full presentation tonight, I mean, this morning is like 28 minutes long. We also have even longer ones that go into this in greater detail. There are actually 3 factors that create a budget gap when a Mitchell-Lama co-op goes private. One of which is the taxes. The other is they have to repay all of their low interest state subsidized loans, including the principal balance on any soft seconds, if any. That's a big hit. So instead of I'm the chairman of the Board of Village East Towers. We have a whole package of loans and funding. If you got our overall debt service rate, it probably comes in at around 1%. If you had to refinance that at 3, even at today's low interest rates, it's a considerable increased cost. The other thing they lose, interestingly enough, is surcharge income. And that creates a budget gap. That makes things cheaper for the wealthier people and more expensive for everybody else.
I can just give you an example, which is in our building, we would lose, it's about a $2 million budget gap if we were to privatize. So between the shelter rent, between paying back our mortgage, and between the loss of about $250,000 of surcharge income. So that's an example.
Well, thank you. And then again, just make sure that if you want to do a presentation, I'm sure I'll get your contact information. I think we'd be very interested at CB7 for hearing from you.
I put our email address in the chat, so everybody should have that now.
Great.
And after today's meeting, I'll send their contact information to the chairs, DMs, and to the housing committee chairs so that you guys can discuss and outreach to them directly for a presentation. Tammy Meltzer.
Steve, sorry, I just want to say that, Stephen, we're very interested in talking to you because I think CB7 may be the champs. You may have more Mitchell-Lamas than anybody else.
Well, I didn't want to say this, but my understanding is we have, and I think that one of the things is we've been trying to get a little bit of accounting, which is so maybe the coordination as well. But I know that we at one point had the most Mitchell-Lamas, but I'm not sure what the current status is.
Okay, we have that data.
I have a spreadsheet which I can also include, which shows how many Mitchell-Lamas apartments and buildings and everything there are in each Manhattan community.
And Stephen, you have St. Martin's and 165 West 96th Street. They're always at edge to go private because what happens is everybody knows, and Dick knows this, is that the children arrive from Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I've been in the room, seen it with my own eyes, and it's, you have to really fight to get this legislation because the children arrive and they want to sell.
Got it. Thanks.
Tammy?
So hi, I'm from CB1, so I am where Southbridge Tower resides. We well know the problems that they're having. I agree with Gail that had the Proxy been different, it was one of the most painful experiences that permeated the neighborhood. That being said, we've actually lost 2 other large scale affordable housing. If you think of Gateway Plaza, which used to be all affordable when it was originally done, and you think of Independence Plaza. So we've seen this time and time again and are a complete example of, I think at this point, what we could be on your slide as a case scenario beyond Southbridge. So I appreciate this presentation. We welcome you to come to CB1 because it's ripe for the dialogue. I'm not sure where 5 World Trade Center is going, but there's certainly an opportunity there between state and city that we should be having a dialogue about how affordability is working there. It's a building that'll be 1,300 units, but only at the moment planned for 25% affordability, which seems insane when you have an opportunity to do something like this. So we certainly welcome you to come and talk at CB1. One of the other questions is, how can you make it appear, because what we hear all the time is it's not fiscally viable for developers. And so when we look at the fact that we do have numerous hotels that are closed right now, how do you see this program being fiscally viable that developers would choose to do this over other things?
You can't rely on developers to do this program unless they're willing to be turnkey developers. In other words, they have to come in, build it. Once it becomes a co-op, then they no longer own it, or they have to turn it over to a not-for-profit rental. The way the Mitchell-Lama program solved this problem was by creating 5% equity down for the developer and 95% in subsidized financing. And we're in a time of low interest rates, this is feasible again. It's debt, but you can't, if you want permanent affordability, you cannot have private developer ownership in the long term, period.
Thank you.
Lee Chung.
I just want to add something to what Richard said. In addition to Brooklyn Borough Board and Queens, the Bronx Borough Board also, I believe, approved our package. And in addition, we're talking a lot about the co-ops, but you got to remember there are the rentals. And there are a lot of rentals who don't have the same power as the cooperatives. So we need to take both into consideration. And actually, I believe the Mitchell-Lama rentals are in a more disadvantaged situation because they don't get to vote. Their landlord gets to decide. And the other issue is, a lot of people may know this, the state housing agency and the city housing agency do not have the same rules and regulations. One example, very important example, in terms of a buyout in the state, when a Mitchell-Lama owner wants to leave, they are required to make all the necessary repairs out of their own current budget prior to allowing the buyout to occur. The city doesn't have that rule. So guess who's left with the baggage? Not the new owner, but the Mitchell-Lama residents whose income is going to go up. So there is a bill that was brought up under Jonathan Bing about 10 years ago, I think, and some of you are around may know it, the May to Shall, which is a big issue with us at the Mitchell-Lama Task Force when I was with the Manhattan Borough President many, many years ago. In any case, in essence, it says legally, because it's a legal term, the may and the shall, that the supervising agency must adhere to its rules and regulations. Right now, they may, and most often they may not, which is what they do, and which is why some Mitchell-Lamas end up buying out, even though there are irregularities. So I think that's something else that needs to be put on the agenda to get a sponsor, a current sponsor in the Assembly and the Senate, which is probably going to be more easier to do since it's both Democratic. In those days, it was always a one-house bill. It passed in the Assembly and died in the Senate. I don't think that will happen today. So may to shall must be brought up as one of the legislative bills. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to say, in the interest of time, Lee, I skipped the negative impact on rentals, but it's there if you want to read about it when you get the slide presentation as a PDF. The other thing is our legislative package does include a provision that the Mitchell-Lama rental tenants need to be offered the option of becoming a Mitchell-Lama co-op before the landlord can privatize, and that they have like a first right of refusal. And that would give current rental tenants more of a voice and more power in these privatization negotiations. What else? Yeah.
Barry has a question. Barry, you should, it's a good one. I don't know if it's possible, but go ahead.
No, I mean, I think
that
it was partially addressed, but if there were a way for the legislative proposal to include a way for clawbacks of Mitchell-Lama rentals in particular, this was, we have lost all of our Mitchell-Lama rentals in Board 9, and we only have one co-op left. But that was a catastrophe that occurred about 15 years ago. And the building is still not in particularly good shape, although they are putting money into modernizing it, the landlord. But if there were ways to include the provisions for clawbacks, or, I understand the grounds would be shaky there because there aren't, the building doesn't have any tie to the program once the subsidized loan is repaid. But I think the provision for any remaining rentals to be, offered a chance to a co-op first is a very good step in that.
Barry, I think it's a terrific idea, and we haven't done it. It's less the idea of a clawback, but right now when you leave the Mitchell-Lama program, your departure is permanent. There's no way to go back in, even if you want to. And if an owner said, I've had it, anyway, I think it should be at least possible. The other thing that I wanted to say about going back to Lee's comments and Southbridge is there are lots of games that people play on the run up to privatization. One, they don't do repairs. Two, they leave a lot of vacancies. They essentially warehouse apartments, and that makes the deal more profitable for the private developer in a rental. It also, as in Southbridge and Columbus Park, makes the deal more profitable to co-ops that go private, because there are a lot of units that they own that they can sell. And Southbridge, you saw the high numbers of flip tax revenue on my graph in the first years. A lot of that revenue came from apartments that they had warehoused. So the oversight agencies could, one, make sure that people make repairs, two, forbid warehousing, and three, make sure by making sure that as long as the building is in the Mitchell-Lama program, that they have to fill vacancies according to the Mitchell-Lama regulations. These would be huge steps that just would require better regulatory oversight, and that would help a lot.
Thank you very much, Mitchell-Lama United. So, every board is different, as is every borough. In Manhattan, most of the boards would need to, the chairs would need to have the board make a decision before they could vote on this in a borough board meeting. So we will work on that, either whether they need individual presentations, and we will get the legislative packet with the white paper and the slide deck out to everyone, along with the contact information for the group. Thank you very much.
Rosie, one other question. What's the timing of the legislation, if you have any sense, in Albany? If it's coming up.
We don't have a good sense in Albany. We've been sort of trying to arrange meetings and stuff, and we've been kind of backburnered until the budget was set. Now we're gearing up again, but I can't actually give you a sense of the timing about when these bills are going to hit the committee, much less the floor.
Because we should probably move fairly quickly, is what I'm trying to tell people, if it's going to happen this session.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Andrea, Lee, Richard, for being here this morning. Now we're going to go to a presentation by Karen Horry, who's the Parks Chair for Community Board 10. Community Board 10 has, in the past few months, been to almost every community board, if not all of them already. And Karen and Cecily, would you like to say something before we bring Karen on to speak?
Yes, thank you, Rosie. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Cecily Harris. I'm the chair of CB10. First of all, I'd just like to thank all the community boards and the chairs. We have been to every single one of your boards doing this presentation. Thank you for allowing us to talk about this issue, this very important issue, the social justice reform that we are talking about. And I'd like to thank you all for letting us have that conversation. I know that when we started this initiative, our first conversation at this board meeting a couple months ago was a little bit uncomfortable and difficult. But in many ways, we have to be thankful and grateful for those conversations, because those are the conversations that get us to a point where we can really talk about real solutions for social justice reform. So I just want to thank you for that. And I want to thank the Borough President's Office for seeing this initiative that we came up with that was just going to be Central Harlem focused, and recognizing that it is an issue that this whole borough needs to support. And I just thank her for just having that vision of us all getting behind this and having this common conversation. And then thank you, Karen, and our CB10 Parks Committee for being so diligent in getting this presentation together, being very active in our community to get our community behind it first. And I thank Karen, Chanel Washington, the entire committee for just their hard work in this. Karen?
You're muted, Karen.
Thank you so very much, everyone. I've got my granddaughter in remote learning, so I'm hoping that doesn't carry over into the presentation, but she's still in class. She'll be out in a few minutes. And I'd like to thank everyone who welcomed us. We did go to all of the boards. We have resolutions and letters of support from all of the boards. So thank you so much for your generosity and for your indulging us in this most vital effort, as Cecily had described. And we want to thank the borough president for all of her wonderful support. She continues to support us through this. And believe me, there are hurdles that we are still having to overcome, but we are making it through with the support of the borough president. So thank you so very much. So with that, I would like to have the screen shared. I've had difficulty in my committee meeting last night, so I'm hoping that the borough board can share the presentation.
There's some echo, Rosie. I don't know what it is. But...
I think it's Karen's daughter who's learning at home in the background.
I'm sorry, she'll be off in just a few minutes.
Louisa, Elka, can we do a screen share? April?
I didn't receive this presentation ahead of time.
I can share it, one moment.
Okay.
All right, can y'all see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Avery, can you turn it down just a notch? All right, is there still an echo?
It's fine, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this is a presentation. It's truncated, so it was a very large presentation. We're looking at commemorating the Exonerated 5 and social justice reform in Central Park. So the mission of this exhibit is to create a permanent Parks and Recreation educational commemoration in Central Park to honor the Exonerated 5 and social justice reform by April 2022. We also seek to raise awareness and sensitivity to a systemic and institutionalized pattern of racial injustice and the need for reform. Our vision is that this will be a public public art project, as public art has the power over time to transform and uplift social consciousness. And we envision a city with successful and engaging public spaces where citizens and visitors alike will encounter a work of public art that is not only captivating, but conscious raising as well. And we envision a permanent commemoration to the fortitude and resilience of the 5 men now known as the Exonerated 5, and to the need for social justice reform. This is a commemorative permanent art piece which would be sited in the northeast section of Central Park that celebrates the extraordinary diversity and history of our community while pointing to the city's aspirations for the future. And we seek to increase language and spur around advocacy for social justice reform. The goals of in-park commemoration would be to shed light on the prejudice, hatred, and ultimately unnecessary incarcerations that occur due to the inequities inherent in the American justice system, which impact very heavily on our community. To inform, engage, and activate the public in building a path to healing for Black and Latinx communities in Harlem, the nation, and throughout the world. So we're looking at ending advocation for ending racist mass incarceration and educating and not incarcerating and eradicating the school to prison pipeline, which is very real in our community. So African Americans make up approximately 13% of the American population, but roughly 36% of the 2.2 million Americans incarcerated. About 1 in 9 Black men between the ages of 22 and 34 years old are in prison. New York City's communities of color are disproportionately impacted by incarceration. And youth of color remain far more likely to be committed to incarceration facilities than white youth. Between 2003 and 2013, the racial gap between Black and white youth in secure facilities increased by 15%. High imprisonment rates correlate with other community problems related to poverty, employment, education, and health. And this inequitable disparity has been made even more evident as a result of the ravages of COVID-19. Improvements made to the northern end of the park began in 1989 following the Central Park jogger case. Work on the ravine located in the northern part of the park was completed by 1992. The Central Park Conservancy announced a $51 million campaign for upgrades in 1993, resulting in the restoration of bridle trails, the mall, the Harlem Mere, the North Woods, and the construction of the Dana Discovery Center at the Harlem Mere. An in-park commemoration will present a forum to raise conscious awareness around the need for social and criminal justice reform. A gross miscarriage of justice that forever brutally altered the lives of the young men from the community who formerly saw the north end of Central Park as their backyard. The in-park commemoration would encapsulate a return to the site of origin of the miscarriage of justice, and in a sense, coming full circle. This would be an added component in the promulgation of an iconic healing of systemic wounds on a broader societal level. The park is the most natural location for a commemoration since its location is burned into the collective memories of New Yorkers as a major turning point in our city's history. Next slide, please. An in-park commemoration would also make possible outreach to audiences that the exhibit would seek to engage. So that would include local area residents, Black and Brown communities at the northern border of the park that have been generationally impacted by mass incarceration and the economic and social disparities that collectively affect them. And also the affluent communities surrounding Central Park are raising consciousness and awareness around social justice issues. We would also seek to engage the 42 million visitors who annually visit Central Park. And the media, encouraging them and getting them to be more equitable in their reporting of issues. The youth and engaging the youth community teaching them about the scourge of wrongful conviction, about how racism defeats the presumption of innocence, and helping them to be engaged in social change. So desired takeaways for visitors would be to reflect on the human cost of systemic racism and explore the roles and responsibilities of individuals, society, and government when confronting racism, injustice, and institutionalized inequities, and also to educate the public about what led to the conviction and subsequent exoneration of the Central Park Five, including the historical context about policing in New York City at the time, and also engaging them around issues, current day issues. The presumption of innocence was totally disregarded, and the imprisonment ordeal and subsequent family suffering should be designed to be powerful but palatable to the viewing experience. The blatant racism should be graphically exemplified with Donald Trump's full-page ads in the media as part of the middle section of this exhibition. Generous use of color should permeate the graphics throughout. The exhibit, as it stands now, is anomalous. We do not know what that will take place, what that will entail. Because we do plan to have an art selection process as a part of this commemoration. So the project would also advocate for social justice reforms, such as ending unnecessary jail detention for people awaiting trial and for low-level offenses, shortening excessive prison sentences and improving release processes, sentencing fewer people to incarceration and making sentences shorter, changing the financial incentives that fuel punitive justice system responses, stopping probation and parole systems from fueling incarceration, keeping juvenile justice, criminal justice, and immigration processes separate, giving all communities a voice in how our justice system works, and examining punishment versus rehabilitation. So this exhibit will provide an opportunity to educate the public while engaging the community as partners in reform about various policy campaigns, both in New York and throughout the US, including such as Wrongfully Convicted Recovery Act, eliminating qualified immunity, and so on. As a part of our planning methodology, we vetted this issue very extensively. It was voiced at first, a request to have this explored was voiced at our October 2nd, 2019 General Board meeting. We then took it up in committee, and these are the dates: December, January, February, March, April, and May. We had discussions with community stakeholders, elected officials, city and state agencies, and not-for-profits in order to solidify a broad-based and diverse subcommittee to bring to fruition a permanent exhibit to be located in Central Park. So on March 25th, the executive committee unanimously voted to authorize the formation of a permanent Parks and Recreation exonerated 5 Central Park. We voted to authorize a formation of a subcommittee to deal with the issue. On June 3rd, we passed a resolution. We unanimously passed a resolution in support of the project. We then had public panel discussions on July 9th, July 16th, and July 23rd. The panels, we had panelists, Sarah Burns. I'm sorry. It was a very diverse, we had Cynthia Copeland of the Seneca Village Project, Brenda Berkman of the Women's Monument, Women's Suffrage Monument, I'm sorry, I'm a little,
Monumental Women.
Monumental Women, yes. We had Sarah Burns, filmmaker, Malik Yoba, an actor and activist, Yusef Salam, a member of the Exonerated Five, Mrs. Sharon Salam, mother of Yusef Salam. We had Mr. Barreto, who was a art selection specialist. So we had a very eclectic panel, a group of panelists. We also had a corporate attorney come on as well. Jay Larry, who's a corporate attorney, formerly with Skadden Arts. So as I was saying, we thoroughly vetted this issue. We came to the borough board and we were asked to go out to all of the individual boards. So we have attended all of the individual boards and made presentations. We submitted a statement of objectives and goals to Central Park Conservancy and New York City Parks on October 23rd of 2020. We then received feedback on January 12th. So Central Park Conservancy is now engaged in internal conversations to do a gate naming for the exonerated. We would then have signage attached to that or associated with the gate that would be specific to the storytelling of the Exonerated Five, an educational component, a tie-in to other monuments in Central Park that deal with social justice issues and social justice reform and where we are and what's taking place. So this would be a standalone website. We have a pro bono web developer that is going to do the work for us. We received assistance from the borough president to get funding for the startup costs for that project. And we have just recently heard that Partnerships for Parks will be this fiscal conduit for the startup costs, which we can then pass on to the web developer. We are going to have a charrette at our next subcommittee meeting once we have all the legalities squared away. So we are currently waiting to hear back from the New York City Law Department about to just make sure that our agreement that we have with the developer is in order. So that concludes my presentation. If anyone has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
If you can raise your hand, I see Tammy, you're physically raising your hand.
I just want to say thank you. And the reason why I want to say thank you is this, from where we sit in CB1, was very community-based build up for support, and really showed what, when you engage in community and you engage in through the community boards, that you can actually do really positive, progressive thought process. And instead of having top down telling us what we should have, having it come grassroots and up is really what we're all about. And I want to thank you, because we in CB1 are oftentimes told by the governor what we're getting and how we're getting it. And it doesn't have any community involvement. This was a long, hard process. And I just want to say thank you for the efforts. Thank you for showing that it is possible and for leading. It was really amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry Weinberg.
I just want to also say thank you. I know that Nine's Parks and Landmarks Committee was very excited to have your presentation, and the board was excited to support it. This was very important to our community as part of the communities affected by the Exonerated Five issue, as well as the broader issues of mass incarceration and criminal justice. So I want to commend you for the years of work that you've put into this project, and say how grateful that we are as a board that, you know, this work is being done and has been done to, you know, spread the word across Manhattan.
Thank you.
Russell Squire.
Thanks. I just want to join with what others have said and just say thank you for all your work on this. And, Community Board 8, we voted to support, bringing a memorial to the exonerated 5. And, we're looking looking forward to hearing more, as the proposal continues to advance and continuing to support it. And, let us know if there's anything else that we can do in the interim.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mark Levine, council member.
I just want to say how inspired I was by the presentation and by this project, and want you to know you have my full support. And I guess the question is, at what point are you starting to sketch out funding needs, capital requests, and whether that could be ready by this budget cycle, which is now, as you know, well underway?
We are acting as facilitators for this project. So we are, Central Park Conservancy has not, they have volunteered to do the gate naming. And there's also expected to be a curated exhibit. So they have not presented us with any inquiries about funding at this point. Once the permanent exhibit, which we expect to have in place by 2022, goes through the process of art selection and the construction of whatever that's going to be, that would probably require funding. So we're not at that point as yet. And as I said, we're just facilitating the process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So thank you, Community Board 10, Karen, for your leadership, and Cecily, and the task force, and taking this from an idea to something that will become a reality for generations to know about the injustices that happens to our Black and Brown communities. Thank you so much. Cecily, I don't know if you, or Karen, if you want any closing words.
Cecily?
No, I think I said enough in the beginning, but again, I just want to thank everyone. This has been an initiative that has taken a lot of hard work from a lot of people, but it does definitely comes from a very good and needing, helpful place. And we're just excited to see so many people taking a part in this initiative and really getting behind it, giving us excellent suggestions of how we can make it better. I think that was one of the things that we saw as a helpmeet by presenting it to all the boards, is that we can get a different perspective and thought leadership of how we should do this and what this should look like and the crafting of it. So again, just thank you all so much for this.
Thank you all. So just going back to some housekeeping, I'm just confirming. I know Barry Weinberg from Community Board 9 is now present. Is anyone here from Community Board 3? Community Board 12? Okay, we are going to move to chair reports, and we will start with Community Board 4 because it is the month of April. Jeffrey LaFrancois.
Thank you, Rosie. I mean, April's my birthday month too, so I just feel so lucky all around to have Board 4 starting. Good morning. Thanks, everybody. Just a couple of brief updates. I want to thank Gail and the Borough President's budget for renewing our Zoom subscription for the year. It's really, we're very thankful. I think we all know how tight our budgets are, so to have that coming from your office means a lot, so we can keep our productivity going. Most of my comments are on the waterfront. We are continuing to push really hard to get rid of the heliport off of 30th Street. Gail has long been involved in this fight. My main question as it relates to this is, what entity is responsible for enforcing state Supreme Court decisions? Because in 2007, the state Supreme Court said the heliport needs to go, and yet it's 2021 and the heliport remains. So this continues to be a West Side challenge. And we're really thankful for Gail's support so far. Also, Pier 76, an exciting open space coming to fruition. If you haven't been along the West Side Highway, get on a bike, take a walk, take a ride to see that transformation taking place. It's going to be a 5.5 acre open space that is 22 years in the making. And we're excited to be a part of this process, to have brought it to life. I know that Gail and I have had some back and forths on this because of course it used to be the tow pound, and now Manhattan towed cars are either being booted or brought to the Bronx or Brooklyn, and there's not yet a Manhattan solution. And Board 4 has long maintained that we are steadfast on understanding that was a municipal facility in our community district, and we'd be willing to find a space for that in our community district. And we maintain committed to working through finding that space. And finally, just a broad question that continues to come up as the weather gets warmer. I do wonder when the city is going to announce policies as it relates to when it moved residents of congregate shelter into temporary facilities and hotels around the city. What is the plan for moving folks back to congregate settings where services can better be provided? It would be useful to understand a timeline on that. And I know our board is going to continue to hear about this and want to opine on policy where necessary. So I leave it at that. Thank you, everybody. Nice to see you all. Happy April.
Thank you. Vicky Barbaro from Community Board 5 was not feeling well this morning. She contacted me to let me know it was short notice to get anyone else here. So I just wanted to say that on the record. And now Kyle from Community Board 6. Kyle Afaid. Okay, he may be busy. Let's move on to Community Board 7, Stephen Brown.
Thank you. We were another busy month here. I'll start out with our land use committee. We did put together and have a very good conversation and put together a resolution in terms of response to the long-term planning and the planning together document. I thought it was a really extensive and a well thought out document. We have several concerns and took a position that we weren't in favor. And if anyone's interested, I think it's actually a very well-written document. In terms of education, a couple things, very busy again. Very happy to see the 2-case closure rule being reversed. We put out a letter regarding that in terms of the concern. It had a very large effect on our community. With that reversal, I think that we've already seen and gotten positive feedback. So very pleased with that. We put together a resolution specifically focused on making sure that the American Rescue Plan money gets to the state and to the city, because we want it down into the city. And I think we're going to keep a very strong look on that, and ask that our Manhattan Borough President and all of our elected officials please make sure that that happens. And also there is a heavy foreshadowing, if we want to say, that we are asking that we have a budget in a timely manner, and that the DOE and the city plan in a timely manner for a timely opening this year of our education, a large school system come September, which we already have concerns and we will continue to work on. In terms of housing, we've had, again, a very busy month on several fronts. NYCHA continues to be a lot of our focus, and one of our one of our members, Madeline Innocent, who's a resident NYCHA lead, has done several meetings in terms of doing the same, making sure the American Rescue Plan money gets down into housing in NYCHA. I would also like to happily announce that there is a pop-up vaccination center that's been starting, I believe, today at Douglas houses. So we're very, very happy about that. We also met in our housing committee with the Federal 8, which is a group of NYCHA leaders for various different houses, centers that have sort of worked together. And Polly Spain, who is on CB7, helped coordinate that. And we heard a lot of their challenges, and we're going to be putting together something to address that. But we were very concerned And one of the themes is that they all, are sharing that they feel the communication with NYCHA is at an all-time low for them, and we want to help them. And then the last part is we did get a presentation regarding what we call up here the collegiate money, which was a large swath of money set aside. And we wanted to get it accounting, which we finally did. I think the good news was it was spent and we did get the accounting. I think the overall disappointment is that this money was really focused on providing new housing, and the money was used in more established places. So we're certainly happy that it was used to keep places open, but we were disappointed that it really was supposed to be a net gain and not to help keep housing. And I think that was what we walked away from being frustrated about. I would like to echo Jeff's thoughts on CB4 about getting an update on the hotels. We've got several up here. It's been very, very controversial issue, and it's one of the more asked questions is when will that transition begin? And I feel we'd like to support that as well in terms of getting some feedback. And then lastly, I did want to mention something, a resolution that we brought up a couple of times, and that was we put out a resolution about hate crimes called Condemnation of Hate Crimes and Support for Education and Training. I think we sent it out a couple months ago. I'd like to follow up. I think it's very timely. We did have an incident in Central Park with an Asian American that we're very concerned about. And I would ask that the other boards read this, and we should consider doing something board-wide. And I would point out that it doesn't just condemn, but it also had some really positive steps. It talked about education, talked about training, and had a lot of very specific, I think, constructive plans to tackle this. And I think that's important. Many people condemn, but I think this one was very, very well thought out. And I'm going to work with April Adams to hopefully facilitate this around and take the next steps. And that's my report.
Thank you very much. Russell Squire. Community Board 8.
Thank you. So we usually have the Borough Board meeting right after our full board meeting, and this year, because of the vagaries of the calendar, we don't. So it'll probably be a little bit of a shorter report this time. But first of all, last night we passed a resolution that had come out of our Social Justice Committee focused on police reform. And we had previously sent a letter on this topic, and this was all in the context of the reform bills that the council had been looking at, and I know they have passed a number of those, and all in the context of the governor's call for police reform. So the board listed pretty extensive list of police reforms that we would like to see prioritized, and there was a good discussion in the committee about that, and the board passed its approval of those recommendations. In addition, we at our land use committee last night, we had a presentation from George Janes talking about the Planning Together initiative, and that follows a presentation we had previously had from the City Council, and we now have a task force that's going to be looking at this further, really going line by line and looking at this in depth to come up with our comments and recommendations and criticisms and all of that on the proposal. It is good to hear that other boards have been looking at that. I'd be curious actually to see what the other boards have come up with. And one of the comments that we had gotten last night was about wanting to coordinate with other boards on our approaches to this. And I imagine that as everybody's looking at it, there are going to be some consistent things that folks are saying, and so to the extent that there's sort of consensus on certain issues, then I think it would be useful for all of us to coordinate, borough-wide on those and make those recommendations even stronger. I should say that the Kohler Task Force that we have had going on has seen a good deal of progress recently, and I just want to thank Gail again for her leadership there, and also the other elected officials who have been participating in that. Just to sort of fill everybody in a little bit, Kohler Hospital is a nursing home on Roosevelt Island that was hit very hard by COVID, and the task force has been working to try and help the residents there. And some of the big issues, I'm sure if other folks have seen it in their districts, the state guidance on nursing home visitation and restrictions on nursing home residents has been very, very onerous. And so, the problems in the nursing homes originally, obviously, there were people getting sick and dying in large numbers, which was awful. And now, thankfully that aspect of it has abated, but we now have a situation where folks in nursing homes have been isolated for over a year at this point. And so they've been pushing to try and get visitation, trying to get the ability to leave and go into the community the way they used to. And there were a lot of restrictions on that. And finally, those are starting to be loosened. And so residents are getting visitors. They're going to have more visitors is what we're being told. They're going to be allowed to leave the facility without having to be quarantined. So those are all very welcome developments, and we're going to continue to fight on those. But in any event, that was a very positive thing that happened at the community board. So that's all I got for Community Board 8.
Thank you very much. Barry Weinberg, CB9.
So we are having our monthly board meeting tonight, and there's plenty on the agenda. A lot of what we are focused on deals with two things. One is the continued vaccination efforts. Our zip codes 10027, 10031 have adults, percentage of adults who've received at least one vaccine dose right around 40%. That is in contrast to most of the zip codes in Manhattan, which are above 60%. And so, our vaccination rates look more like the Bronx than they do the rest of Manhattan. We now have a permanent city vaccination site at City College, which we did not have in CB9 previously. We're very excited about that. And we've been working with them to get folks signed up, particularly from our Night 2 developments and 3333 Broadway. We are also continuing to do pop-ups throughout the district, working with Columbia University, New York Presbyterian, the governor's office, to reach those harder to reach populations and try to bring our vaccination numbers up as we enter the summer here and as the variants continue to spread in New York. We are also making efforts to vaccinate the homeless population in our district, which is large and growing, and has had inadequate and uneven access to vaccination, in part because many sites require an address or an ID. So we're working to clear those hurdles for folks. We are also attempting to prepare for the summer in two ways. One is to do youth outreach and youth program connections. So whether that's summer youth employment, whether that is Harlem School of the Arts, whether that is, the variety of different youth programming arrays, we're trying to coordinate that and really make sure that the summer is a time where students can recover from a lot of the learning loss that's occurred throughout this year as classes went remote and as many students fell off the grid and the radar at the DOE. And also, we've seen an uptick in shootings and youth-involved violence in the district already as the weather's gotten a little warmer, and trying to make sure that there are constructive enrichment and employment outlets for youth this summer. And then additionally, having a conversation with our Parks Department about, ways to, and the PD, ways to handle noise complaints this summer. We expect that this summer, like last summer, a lot of people, even more than ever, are going to be treating our parks and our sidewalks as, the common social spaces, and just going over, how do we deal with the noise complaints that'll come when someone's playing really loud music at 2 a.m. under or across the street from a residential building. And we had an enormous surge of that last year. We're anticipating the same. We do have a ULURP application that is on the clock for us, which is seeking to rezone an area along Riverside and demolish some historic townhouses that were actually specifically downzoned in the West Harlem rezoning, the Hamilton Heights, West Harlem North rezoning. And so we're conducting our public hearing on that next week, and we'll be voting on our statement at the full board, which should give us plenty of time under the 60-day window before it gets to the borough president. And I think those are my updates from Ward 9.
Thank you very much. Cecily Harris, CB10.
Hello again, everyone. So for good news for us, we have the Doran Brooks Historic District that has been put on the calendar for April 20th at LPC. We are really excited about it. As if I've talked about it before, but it is named for a Harlem hellfighter, Doran Brooks, in 1925. So this is very timely for us, celebrating we want to call it the second Harlem Renaissance. And that area is just very prolific. W.E.B. Du Bois lived there, Dr. May Chin. So this is really a great effort for us. One of our chairs of landmarks, Keith Taylor, has been very instrumental in this. So we are just excited to see this finally coming to fruition. Secondly, I just want to talk about, again, I've talked to Barry about this, some summer initiatives for our youth. We definitely want to echo everything that he said. I think all these chairs have talked about SYEP. What will that look like? How is that rollout going to work? So we are looking at that as well. We've actually talked to some of our politicians on the ground here about last year we started a conversation council just to figure out, what we can do in our area to make sure that our summer youth are engaged and doing something very positive, and that the community, and that if they see the community, they're supporting them, looking out for their future. So we have started that conversation again, and I know Barry and I have talked about maybe doing some things together. Hopefully all the other chairs will be interested as well, and we can move forward and really support our youth in that way. I'd also like to quickly address the vaccine issue. We also, in a lot of our zip codes, are not seeing the numbers that we hope to see. And I have to tell you, and I guess you all are feeling this pain too, that whole Johnson & Johnson thing didn't help us out at all. So we are really having those conversations, and it's hard to get people to trust it. And then, when the media and all these things are coming up, it's really hard. So we are talking about having street teams kind of going out and just talking to people, folks who have had the vaccine, just giving their own stories to show that folks that look like them are getting it, and we are fine. We're still here. We're thriving. So we're trying to get something together where we can actually have those conversations with our local folks. And then lastly, we've had a conversation before with the Borough President's office about our local churches being put in really dire straits, having to make hard decisions with their property. One of our, prolific churches, Grace Baptist, is facing that right now. And I think it's time that we have another conversation with these local bulwarks of our community, with these entities, because we are losing them, and they are in these real hard places right now. So I think they need support, they need education on those resources that are there. So I hopefully we'll be able to start that conversation again. That's all for CB10.
Thank you. Nilsa Arama, CB11.
Good morning, everyone. And I echo everyone's thoughts around the table regarding vaccines and how Johnson & Johnson did not help us. I want to congratulate Community Board 10 in terms of the initiative that they have been pushing forward regarding the Central Park 5 and all the great work that all our boards do. And it's always a wonderful thing when Community Board 11 collaborates with our fellow boards and actually interact with our chairs as well. So first, I'm just going to do a quick brief. Yesterday I was part of the 23rd Precinct Advisory Board. That's an advisory council that has been made up by the 23rd Precinct for 5 members of the community to work with the police leadership to identify major issues within the community and to hone in on potentially 3, and to bring in all the resources to bear to try to assist in helping to resolve or at least mitigate those concerns. And so one of the things that we're looking at is we're looking at past minutes from the actual precinct council meetings to get a sense of what the community has mentioned as major issues, in addition to our own experiences within our communities. I'm happy to report that although it's never enough, the Borinquen Health Center had opened up as a vaccination center. And so that's one more center in East Harlem. We never have enough. And with, as we said, with the Johnson & Johnson issue, the more centers we have that help service our community, the better. In terms of our committee work, our public safety committee looked at co-namings the 101st Street and Lexington corner for Cicely Tyson. And so that's something that was looked at and will come before our full board. Discussions are ongoing now with the warm weather, the e-bikes, and the safety concerns in regards to our young people and others using e-bikes and not following the rules and the regs. We've had in some of our committees, there's been a discussion about the Environmental Justice for All report. We've had presentations on the East Harlem Resiliency update. The Human Services Committee did a moratorium regarding no new substance abuse programs in East Harlem until a pause for roughly a year is the recommendation, so that the community board can assess the programs that are here. What is the work that's actually been doing? What's the service level of the community? And if there are missing services that we should be actually looking at instead of just blanket programs such as these. So that was one of the major topics that has been ongoing in this community for years, and it finally has resulted in a moratorium. We've had the Human Services Committee had a vaccination update, test and trace, Project Hope. Volunteers of America have come to talk to us regarding their shelter on Randall's Island. The Youth and Education Committee had looked at and will come before the full board a resolution opposing anti-Asian violence. We also at Community Board 11 are always concerned about our summer youth employment programs. I have personally spoken to one provider who has been given 1,500 young people. And my understanding that the discussion is that the younger groups will be doing virtual and potentially projects, while the older groups from 16 to 24 will be placed in job assignments. But that's very preliminary. And at this point, I have nothing else to report. Obviously, our work continues. We are always concerned. We've had crime in East Harlem like everyone else. We do have homeless issues just like everyone else. Nothing has changed from month to month, so I won't belabor that point, but we will continue to work to better our community with all our help and all our sister boards' helps. I appreciate all the support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tammy, Community Board 1, Tammy Meltzer.
Good morning, and thank you very much. First, I want to say a thank you to Manhattan Borough President and Councilmember Chin for their support and help in securing a pool for the Harbor School out on Governor's Island. This will help them as a school fulfill their mission and on the island on property, and they won't have to send their kids any longer to Brooklyn or Manhattan to fulfill their required programming. So it's a huge win, and we really want to thank the Harbor School families are thrilled. I also want to say thank you for working with us to continue the independent review of the brownfield cleanup site in CB1. And because the Seaport is so incredibly active now for hopefully scheduling an upcoming Seaport Advisory Group. With the East River Promenade is going to be changing, and the Seaport District, because the New Market building will be going under demolition shortly. For those who remember, we spoke last month about, unfortunately, the murder that happened in that location. That building is going to be demoed shortly. CB1 tried to fight long and hard to keep the building as a historic thing, but without funding, we lost that fight. But we're looking to have dialogues about the development as we celebrate things like our new park at Peckslip Park and work with the Parks Department. For land use, we did have a panel discussion this month on the comprehensive planning where we had 3 panelists come and speak about pros and cons of it. So much like the other boards, we'll be looking at this. We took a fairly deep dive on it and we'll pass a resolution next month. We do have some concerns about the executive orders as we're coming out of the pandemic. We'd like to encourage the reopening of the POPs. And we want to have a note here that there's been a lot more city overstep. We've spoken about it with DOT and City Bike, but I think for us, we've had a long controversial POPs that the community was promised to be filled with greenery and seating and is now completely covered with a giant City Bike installation where there is another one of similar size, literally 1 block away. So it's the combination of those two that we're finding particularly galling, because we don't have, there's no requirement for DOT to ask the city, ask the community board. They inform the community board where they're going. So it's frustrating. And hopefully many have heard that 5 World Trade Center, the RFP was awarded. It'll be a mixed use residential commercial project. We're hoping for further support from our elected officials to increase the quantity and diversity for maximum affordable housing in that location, as well as looking at a comprehensive way that any new construction in that area can fit into the urban landscape. For environmental, we have an upcoming presentation on the final plans and redevelopment for Wagner Park and the pavilion. It is by the Battery Park City Authority. It is a resiliency plan, but it is a full redevelopment of the park in its existing state. It will be fully demolished, both the award-winning artistic building and the park itself, and will be rebuilt. Despite many resolutions that have said that there were things that we didn't like, it is fully going forward, as well as protecting Pier A and the top of the Battery. New bike lanes have been announced that have come to us that will be added to the Brooklyn Bridge. So if you have tried to get over the Brooklyn Bridge by foot or by bike, it's really just a nightmare over there. So new DOT has announced that brand new bike lanes will be installed. So what's currently a combination bike pedestrian way will become pedestrian only, and new bike lanes, which is really exciting if you've ever ridden or walked the bridge. Lastly, we hope, we passed a resolution in our Quality of Life Committee last month about the Hate Crimes Task Force and the NYPD. I don't know if everybody knows, but NYPD has the first Asian Hate Crimes Task Force, which is amazing, but it's all voluntary. It's completely unfunded. So similar to what Stephen said and CB7, we hope that we can share this resolution with all the boards, calling on the mayor to fund the task force. The NYPD can only do so much with volunteers. So that is my report. We are very busy. We look forward to working and partnering. I do want to say thank you for the last housing forum that we all put together for the Manhattan boards on gentrification, and we look forward to the next one to participate and work on holistic stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Janine Kiley, CB2.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. This is my first one. So I want to first thank President Brewer for joining our community last Friday night for reopening of and launching the Greenwich Village Little League season that was canceled last year. It couldn't have been a more perfect evening. It stopped raining, the lights were on, the kids were happy. So thank you, Gail. I also want to do a shout out to all of our teachers. There's all the elementary schools in our community and citywide. They are working round the clock to put in plans to reopen K-5 schools 5 days a week. And this gets back to what we've heard several people say, is that for September, we need to make sure that our schools are reopening and that teachers and the principals have enough lead time to put plans in place. Our schools committee had a presentation from the Independent Budget Office. Carter cases, where basically parents sue the city to send their child to a private special education school, are up 500% over the last 10 years to 710 million. There are nearly 14,000 students but the IBO was not able to get any demographic or geographic data. So we would really, the board will be presenting a resolution, but we would really like help to get this information. I mean, we suspect we know who's being helped and who's not being helped, but I think demographic data would be really critical here. We also had a presentation from Class Size Matters. I'd encourage other boards to reach out to them. They view the federal stimulus money as the best opportunity to reduce class size that would to basically levels that we see elsewhere in New York State, which I think would really help with the reopening and the rebounding of the city, because then people will no longer feel that they need to go to the suburbs to get a smaller class size, and that would take about 1,000 teachers. In terms of culture, David Hammond's permanent public art project Days End is opening on the Gansevoort Peninsula on May 16th. So after you drive by Pier 76 or get on a bike, just head a little further south and check out this beautiful installation. We best at sunset. In terms of zoning and land use, the board is taking a look at the first of 5 coming citywide zoning amendments. For the first is zoning for accessibility. And this month, our board meeting is next week, and we have a fully packed end of month. So there's not a lot of resolutions to report on, but our equity working group on April 27th is having a panel discussion on the collective trauma in the Asian and Black communities. And on the 28th, our equity working group and economic development committee are hosting a joint meeting, reviving the Chinatown economy, small business, post-pandemic outlook. In terms of reopening, Community Board 2 has the most self-certified open restaurants citywide, almost 1,000. By the way, in the city, Community Board 3 is number 3, and Community Board 5, number 2, and Community Board 5 is number 3. Obviously, there's an ongoing need to balance supporting small businesses, reopening the city, and quality of life, particularly on our residential streets. And we want to continue to be nimble for when we eventually go back to in-person public meetings. So just want to repeat what Carter Booth was talking about is getting assistance from the Borough President's Office to develop a viable and functional hybrid model. And finally, I don't know if Councilmember Levine is still on, but really it's like, now that the J&J vaccines are paused, how do we help our homebound seniors get vaccinated? And that's more of a question, obviously. And thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Kyle Athade, Community Board 6.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. Sorry I missed my first turnaround. I was getting something off the stove. But just to go through some things that have already been mentioned. First thing is the anti-Asian attacks that we're seeing. As the only Asian community board chair in Manhattan on this is obviously something that really hits personally. But to see that particularly our East Asian and other South Asian communities are the ones that are being targeted, obviously requires all of us to stand in solidarity. And tonight at our public safety meeting, we will be discussing some of the plans that are out there to combat this, as well as some of the city plans as well. But one of the things that I stressed at our full board meeting last night, which I encourage everyone else to do, and I know that we've all had these discussions on the side, is to combat the bystander effect. One of the things that we've been seeing, aside from the perpetration of these horrible crimes, have been the bystander effect. People who have been just watching it and not really intervening in multiple different ways. It doesn't always require physical intervention, but there are other ways to help people out. Something as simple as lending a comforting hand to someone who's been victimized. So as much as everyone can stress that, I know we've already been doing that, that would be really wonderful. And I know that Stephen had mentioned doing some work, so I'd love to partner up with you, Stephen, on anything that we can do on that. The other thing is at the end of March, has been mentioned, we had the joint community board programming on gentrification. I was really honored to be able to moderate that discussion, and want to thank the borough president for participating on that panel as well as all of our different stakeholders who participated. It went really, really well. And we got a lot out of it. And I think these are really great opportunities to hear from people who are impacted by these issues rather than just, sharing information for the sake of information. So I look forward to the future programming. So all of the chairs who have been participating should have gotten an email from me about next steps. And Jesus, our district manager, should be sending out a Zoom invite for tomorrow at some point today. But I know there are some new faces here as well. So if you are interested in participating and joining the coalition, I'll put my email in the chat. Please email me so you can get onto the list and we can include you in tomorrow's meeting. We also have had discussions, as has just been mentioned, about how we are going to do public meetings going forward. So Community Board 6 had put out a survey to the public for the past couple of months, and our Governmental Affairs Committee discussed this on Monday, the results, and big surprise, a hybrid model was really endorsed and advocated for. And so our committee will be discussing resolutions on how this can look going forward, because obviously this requires some changes at the state level about how public meetings can be conducted. And so would love to collaborate. I think it should be a borough-wide borough board resolution on that so that we can all work together in advocating for how we think these programs should be moving. Some other quick updates. As many of you might know, there was an issue with a hotel in our district called the Renwick Hotel that was supposed to be transformed into a permanent homeless shelter for families. There was a lot of controversy around it. There were some issues with the report, the fair share analysis report that was put out, a lot of inaccurate data that our board sent a public letter to make sure that this process was comprehensive, accurate, and transparent. Turns out that there was an issue with the landlord, and so the city will no longer be pursuing that as a location in our district. And there's no further information that we have on that. As has been mentioned before, CB6 has been working with DYCD on their summer youth employment program. They have a particular need for diversifying the type of businesses that can offer internships and other placements for our young people. And one of the things that we discussed too were making sure that we can target our outreach to the to the communities that are not, necessarily participating in the program and don't necessarily have the opportunity to engage. And so we want to make sure that we are micro-targeting and making sure that this information is available. And then the last thing I'll just mention is I will be co-moderating a town hall on April 27th at 5:30 p.m. with the Executive Superintendent Morales and our local superintendent for District 2, Kelly McGuire. It is about reimagining school. So really reflecting on what has happened over the past year and really having a venue for parents, teachers, principals, students to articulate what they would like to see going forward. So really, forward thinking on this. It will be hosted by CB6, but it is open to the rest of the borough. And hopefully these are sessions that can continue in each of your community board districts as well. So I will send out that information to everybody. Hopefully you can attend. Yeah, that's all I have from CB6. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to our General Counsel, Adele Bartlett, who's going to talk about the open meetings law, and then we'll move on to council member reports. Adele?
Hi, thank you, Rosie. Good morning. This will be very brief. I know that all the boards are concerned about the temporary suspension of sections of the open meetings law and whether that will continue. As you probably heard, the governor, like one day before expiration, continued the executive order for almost all of the amendments to various statutes. So the executive order suspending parts of the open meetings law, allowing you to have your meetings over Zoom, is continued through May 6th. There is very little doubt that that will be continued after that. As you know, we sent a letter encapsulating our position, or the borough president's position, on how important it would be to take another look at the open meetings law, looking towards a hybrid model, since many of our boards have experienced an expansion of participation and accessibility through this period. I have been in dialogue with the Committee on Open Government, which is part of the Department of State, which basically oversees the open meetings law. They themselves have been collecting a great deal of feedback about this, and throughout the state, there are comments that they've received and experiences that really reflect what we've seen on our community boards in terms of expansion and wanting to keep the ability to have meetings and have people attend meetings electronically. On the other hand, there are areas of the state that don't have the kind of access that we have in terms of the internet. So there's been that downside that they've also heard. I think what's apparent is that we want the legislature to consider, or the governor to consider, studying and drafting a potential hybrid model, so that those who can and need to attend once the pandemic and things are open, need to attend or want to attend in-person meetings. But the meetings would also be accessible to people who can't otherwise get there. I think that's really important, but as Kyle pointed out, it would take a permanent amendment to the current law. So we're going to keep in correspondence with the Committee on Open Government and with legislatures. We are trying to recirculate our letter from the summer, and we will keep you posted on that.
Thank you very much, Adele. Council Member Mark Levine. He was on. He's been. I don't see him now. I don't know if we lost him. Okay. Council Member Ben Kalos.
Thank you, Rosie, Gail, everyone, for all the great work. I think the most important thing that I have to share is that we've been fighting for 3K for quite a while. When Mayor de Blasio announced pre-K for all in 2014, he didn't really mean Manhattan. And so a lot of our communities had to fight for it, and we didn't actually get it on the Upper East Side till 2017. 2017, the mayor announced 3K for all by 2021, but that somehow excluded school districts 1, 2, and 3, which stretches from the tip of Manhattan all the way to central Harlem. And so the mayor had said during the budget negotiations that if we got funding from Washington, he would do 3K for all and include all of Manhattan. Congressmember Maloney got it done. I went to him and he agreed. So we will be rolling out 3K for all in Manhattan, 16,000 seats citywide. That's just the first part of the problem. So now we have the funding. Now we actually have to get the seats, and it's incredibly challenging in Manhattan because it is already a built environment. We've started to reach out to schools. So if you are interested in having 3K, we're going to need to do a lot of work. First piece is reaching out to schools to see if they're interested in taking 3Ks. I can tell you, I've heard from schools that they've lost between 10 and 25% of their student bodies, but with the 6-foot requirement and the 3-foot requirement and all the different things the mayor is doing, the principals are very unhappy and are not sure how they can accommodate additional 3K. So we're gonna have to see if we can accommodate 3K in our public schools. We need to reach out to existing CBOs that are providing pre-K to see if they'll add additional classes. And I don't think we're going to have enough seats in Manhattan without us doing real work of going to empty Duane Reads. There are hundreds of them that are now empty, and we need spaces that are 10,000 square feet and larger on the first and second floor that are ADA accessible. If you find a space or a provider, if you connect them with education@benkalos.com, we will work with you. We will work with them on the RFP. If they've just got the space, let us know ASAP. We'll work with you and the School Construction Authority to sign a 5 or 10-year lease, go in and make the renovation. And each 10,000 square feet is space is basically will accommodate 80 kids. And we need space for about 16,000 citywide and several thousand in Manhattan. So we got 3K. Now we actually have to get the space to put the 3-year-olds. Full disclosure, after 7 years of advocacy, I now have a 3-year-old and I will be applying. Families should be encouraged to go to the My Schools portal, put their information in, even though they will not be able to apply to anywhere in District 2 or 3. We did participatory budgeting. and that just wrapped up yesterday. So we'll be getting those announcements out. We've been working very closely with April Adams and the borough president and many of the community boards. The election is now less than 10 weeks away. If you are a community board and you have sites for early voting, please get them into April, get them into policy@benkalos.com so we can get the Board of Elections to consider it, and let's put pressure. I'm encouraging every community board that had lines in their district during the early voting to identify locations, and let's put pressure on the big cultural institutions that aren't doing it, and say you have to do your part for democracy. And then just the last piece, if you guys didn't know, I'm a huge science fiction fan, and whether it's Terminator or RoboCop or Isaac Asimov's #1 rule of robotics, Rosie may know this one, is that you can't harm humans. So we've actually introduced that to make that an official law, because I'm not sure if you saw it on Black Mirror or you've been watching the mayor deploying robot dogs in our NYCHA buildings. $74,000. We could buy a social worker with that. And so it's a waste of money. We shouldn't be using robots to weaponize our police and militarize them, particularly in our public housing. And we definitely shouldn't be weaponizing them. So those are some of the things that we're working on.
Thank you very much. No more Borgs. I'm a Star Trek fan. Madam Borough President.
Thank you very much. I know you're a Star Trek fan because I was at the library with Councilmember Kalos and he's going on and on about Star Trek. And I'm like, ugh, I don't like it. Rosie loves it. Oh,
and Lou Fittler was also
Yes.
a big fan. We
I know.
shared that together.
You guys used to sit in the city council. And then Mr. Otto and Mr. Fiddler would spend hours on the what I call fake football. And I was right between them. So. Couple issues. First of all, thank you, Jeffrey, for mentioning Zoom. I hope it is helpful to everybody. Number two, just in terms of the hotels, I ask constantly the Department of Homeless Services, and I have not gotten an answer in terms of when those who are in hotels and vaccinated, what's the status of returning to the shelters? And I don't know the answer, but just so you know, I have not stopped asking. Another sort of what's next, thanks to Matthew Washington, our Deputy Borough President, we know that the REDC, which is the Regional Economic Development Corp, it is the governor's way of giving out economic development money. I believe it's May 7th, but I could have the date wrong, will be the announcement of dollars available. And I always get frustrated because I don't think Manhattan gets our fair share. So, you know, we can send out information, but we're not good in our borough sometimes in really looking at some of these fundings and how it could be of assistance to our small businesses, to our commercial strips, etc. So REDC, they did not put money out last year because of the pandemic, but they are doing it this year. And the other boroughs are very aggressive, and we tried to be, but I could use your help. In addition to the allocations for different projects, there's also the $10 million allocation. And in the past, it has gone to every other borough. Every county gets 10 million. And in our case, it goes to the city. It's not like we're, you know, we are 5 counties, but it goes to the city. It's Manhattan's turn in my book. So I am actually pushing, I'll be very honest with you, for Chinatown to get support. And so we're gonna work with the Chinatown community. Everybody needs help, but I feel Chinatown, between, you know, all the different challenges that they're facing, has a particular need. However, every other community can get money. So I just want to say, pay attention to our EDC. I also just want to mention in terms of quality of life, public safety, et cetera, it is a big issue. I am confused. We have had lengthy conversations with Board 4 NYPD and Board 7 NYPD and community. And this is what I assume is correct, which is the NYPD and DHS is now the main agency working with the homeless. NYPD says they'll back up any challenges. With the vendors, which also becomes a controversial issue, it's the Department of Consumer Affairs and Worker, whatever. And the reason I say all of this is that it's not clear to NYPD exactly how that's all going to work. So it would be something that maybe you should have more discussions of. I think the 2-5 precinct has been the model for Manhattan in terms of how some of these issues are being addressed. So I will look at more carefully in terms of the precinct responding with more human services and social services than NYPD. I just want to say it's confusing, it needs to be worked out, and there are a lot of questions. The other issue you brought up is the issue of, and thank you, congratulations, Councilmember Kalos, on all your work on the pre-K. There's also this whole issue of Manhattan getting screwed in my book in terms of just early childhood dollars. And so we've been working and advocating and pushing, trying to be nice about how the words I'm using, the agencies to get more sites. Some areas got absolutely Lower East Side, Chinatown, West Side, etc., got no sites that are extended day. So what in the world are you going to do with a site that has no extended day? And I have letters on this. I assume you got them. If not, let us know. I just want to talk also quickly about the early voting sites, which I know, thank you, Councilmember Halos, for bringing up. We have to think about this. I'm at fault. When we're doing these rezonings or doing this building is going to get a ULIP, blah, 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 we don't think about space for early voting. We don't think about something else. I called DOT the other day because I so desperately, and I want to find composting, area for the composting site, which we're all familiar with in the East River Park, because we love the folks that run it. Okay, so we tried X site. No, says DOT. Can't do it, need it for our equipment. Well, it turns out that in the borough of Manhattan, DOT has been chased out by the other agencies, mainly EDC, from every 6 sites. So they now have 6 places where their equipment in the borough of Manhattan has been chased out. And so now they're in other boroughs, and the one site that I needed, they need. What I'm saying is when we're doing our rezoning, and I'm at fault for this, but of course nobody says anything because there's no overall planning. We need to think about sites for something as challenging as DOT equipment or sanitation equipment and early voting. That would not have been an issue maybe 10 years ago because we didn't have early voting, but that's something to think about. Just want to make that clear. Yes, the cultural should be doing it, but in addition, we should be thinking about it with making every single voter able to go as local as possible to vote. I know in my area, the seniors have to walk 4 blocks. No big deal for us, but they, it's hard, not easy. So I just want to bring that up. Now, in terms of funding, I'm always looking for money. So many groups are now calling me, and I assume calling Councilmember Levine, Councilmember Kalos, and others for support in getting funding from our members of Congress. I don't believe in recent memory they've had earmarks, but boy, do they have earmarks now. So I assume you're in touch with your member of Congress, and I assume that you know what they're thinking, and I assume you have thought of projects that they need to fund. But that's something that you need to pay attention to. I'm just trying to go through my list of do not forget. I do want to thank particularly Councilmember Brad Lander, because he and I were very aggressive in getting what I would call the Department of Education and the mayor to stop taking money from these schools that had lower populations. That was outrageous. Some schools were having to pay back $800,000 of funding they'd already spent. So we won that fight. It was interesting. We were planning a press conference in the afternoon, and in the morning, the mayor announced they would not be doing clawback. So it's always good to have a press conference about something in the afternoon because maybe you'll get an answer in the morning. I want to say that CAU is now headed up by, as an agency, Commissioner Roberto Perez, whom I think is a good commissioner. He cares about our city. I never understand what half of these agencies are doing, I'll be honest with you, and there are too many of them doing the same thing. That's my opinion about government. But in his case, he has been working, as we all have, on fighting Asian hate. We were in Chinatown doing that, and his folks are doing that, and you've done that, and we've had press conferences, and we have to continue that work. But he also is trying to figure out how, on some of the gang issues, there are lots of wonderful organizations, Harlem, East Harlem, and thinking about how to deal with making sure that there are good messengers in terms of working with young people and adults who are thinking about guns and killing each other, which is terrible. But anyway, I wanted to say that if there was some role that CAU could play in the mayor's office specifically, you should definitely reach out to him. I also want to say that thanks to Hallie Chu and others with our affordable task force on terms of housing, I know you have a copy of that report, but we can't talk about it. We got to do something. Now, some of the nonprofits are purchasing distressed property. I don't like to give out what is happening because then you might set off some individuals who don't want homeless, formerly homeless in their neighborhood. These are for permanent, affordable units. Some of them already have, which I think is an excellent situation, permanently residential units, people living there. And the mixture, I've always believed, if you're gonna have good housing for low-income individuals, you gotta have half people who are working and half people who are homeless. Do not put a completely homeless building in one neighborhood. So, but I'd like to hear, these are, we have some listing, Hallie Chu has the list of the distressed properties, the hotels. There are wonderful leaders in this community, and I think we should be aggressive. We're trying to do that about purchasing, and the city should be aggressive, but if they don't get told to do it, they're very slow to jump on board. And I want to thank Barry Weinberg, because he and I have been working with April Adams on trying to get the city to not do a shelter, but for goodness sake, here's an opportunity to buy a building. The owner wants to do it. The community wants to do it. What in the world is wrong with DHS that they don't want to work with us? So those kinds of issues, I would love to see a whole lot more affordable housing. This is the time in the borough of Manhattan. I also wanted to say, just in terms of ULURPs, we have more than any other, thanks to you. I think we have almost 180 opinions since I became borough president. It's much more than any other borough. I won't go through the list, but right now our staff is working on 18 projects, big ones. Some of them controversial, some of them not. I think you know, because you know your area. And we are planning, I had promised Board 12, and we are working on it to do, and we're gonna try to do this on all the 12 community boards. We're gonna do a bus tour with the community board and others, or we could do a walking tour in your community with city planning, with you, with our staff, just to go through what are the projects that are happening in the area and what is their status. When you see it, it's a lot easier than trying to imagine and to think about the planning, because we don't have a comprehensive planning. And you can certainly hear that from your concerns and mine. We also, just in terms of text amendments, we're working on hotels, zoning for accessibility, which, you know, it makes sense to have those who are building to think about elevators and accessibility in the subways. Obviously, there's an FAR issue there, but it is important. Health and fitness, which I know you've been talking about, because every gym comes to you, and is that really necessary? And then the open streets that you know only too well. April 22nd is Earth Day. We're going to be doing, as we always do, giving out thousands of reusable bags at grocery stores. I know we heard several discussions about vaccines and several discussions about the recovery efforts in the 5 boroughs, and I am so worried about this money. So in terms of the recovery, in terms of the Manhattan Vaccine Task Force, we have every Tuesday at 3 o'clock. You're all welcome. You should sign up. On the vaccines, I heard there was a discussion about homebound, and I'm certainly in agreement, question mark. So what I've learned, and I think from these discussions and others, obviously there's a pause due to the J&J, and I think Yonkers and others will know there are plenty of other cities and entities that are doing the Pfizer or Moderna with the seniors. So there's no reason we can't do it. But how you do it is important. The way that the city's doing it now with the homebound, and I have experience because I've helped constituents, is you have to call 311, you get a form, you fill it out, and then you are evaluated by somebody in city government, and then the fire department, to their credit, comes and gives you the shot. In this case, it was J&J. This is the problem. Why not work with community-based organizations? There are actually 23 CBOs during the week. And then, of course, on the weekend, it's another one, Meals on Wheels. And they are the ones that are the trusted people delivering the food. There are actually 23,000 in these programs. So it seems to me that instead of the senior having to call 311, filling out the form, and with all due respect, and I know this may have been corrected, but the cases I worked on, somehow 2 forms got lost. Now you can imagine the children and the nieces and nephews trying to fill this out and getting it lost. So it must make more sense, particularly for those that are on the roster of the caseworkers, because there are caseworkers at these CBOs. I have one situation in East Harlem with a phenomenal CBO running the senior center. They have 25 seniors ready to go. It's much easier to have the senior center fill out all the forms, get them in together, as opposed to individual and their aides having to do all of that. So I just want to say that is not the best process. I think that FDNY has done about 3,000 shots so far, and obviously we have many more to go. So I would love to see a slightly different process for the homebound, even though I know it's all good intention. And I feel strongly that we should just keep going with the 2 shots and work it out. Extremely important. We also have had lots of discussions from Memorial Sloan Kettering, MSK, about an initiative where they're going to work with teens. I think you know that in terms of curbing vacancy hesitancy with their amazing diverse group of resident doctors. We also heard from the Department of Health on this issue at the most recent discussion from Stanley Isaacs, which did a phenomenal job in a development night shift. Sometimes it's a well-done job, sometimes it's not. I've been to every single site in the borough of Manhattan. I just want to also mention that on this Thursday, we're going to switch over to the issue of funding from the federal government. And to the credit of the mayor, he appointed Lorraine Grillo, who is now the New York City's recovery czar. She's going to be there at 3 o'clock. I strongly urge you to participate because you can ask her questions. She is the person to answer. We have money coming in on every single aspect of our city. I think you know that. I'm nervous about the health funding going. I'm nervous about the housing funding. I'm nervous about the food funding. I'm nervous about the school funding, etc. Infrastructure, jobs, etc. She hopefully will help us answer it and understand the thinking of the city as spending this money and making sure that Manhattan gets its fair due. I just want to talk about schools. One more thing. I heard great discussion. Guess what? In addition to SYEP, summer school, I don't know what it's called, Summer Rising or something. I'm going to meet with the executive superintendent, who I think is terrific in Manhattan, because the community-based organizations, there's money. They need to be, whether it's arts, sports, etc. In every single neighborhood, they need to be part of these schools and figuring out how the young people can A, more of them to participate, and B, have fun and have the high quality experience that the CBOs offer. Most of these, I have to be honest, with all due respect to the principals, they have no idea who the CBOs are in the area. You know. So please, let's work on this together. I'm very nervous that they're not going to do that. Also, in terms of budget, I'm just going to go back. Units of appropriation. I know this is like nuance, in the weeds, but keep thinking about it, because when we have this money coming from the federal government, the city council does a great job of oversight. I'm sure the state will do some also, but if it's not broken down into some kind of an understandable unit of appropriation, it is not going to be something that the public will understand and that the city will get over on us. So I hope that you will pay attention to that. I know that the Harlem Health Fighters, in addition to the great discussion we heard earlier, I want to thank Congressman Tom Suozzi because he's trying to get them the Congressional Gold Medal. We were there for a ceremony recently, and goodness knows they deserve it. I thank those who mentioned our community leadership training series because it started last month. Thank you, Rosie Mendez and April Adams for organizing it. Tonight is the last session. It's on parliamentary procedures, and it's a lot of work to do, so I appreciate that people found it helpful. The board, the staff here has been through 728 applications. We have met, I think, with most of the council members, and we are hoping to have appointments or reappointments done by beginning of May. It's very hard because there aren't a lot of openings, and then people get very upset with me because they're not on the community board, and there's a lot of people we have to turn away. We try hard to find other opportunities, whether it's SWAB, cultural board, etc. But it's not easy to turn away. There may be other ways we could think together of involving the wonderful applicants who there's just no room. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and congratulations to all the boards for all your hard work.
Thank you very much, Madam Borough President. We've been joined by Councilmember Levine again. Thank you for coming back. I think you got lost or had a issue, and you can give your report now.
Well, thank you, Rosie. And as you all might have guessed, I have that horrible pandemic experience of multiple Zooms simultaneously. And unfortunately, I only have now about a minute. But I do just want to address a point that so many of you chairs brought up in your presentations about concerns about where we are with vaccination and the impact of the J&J disruption. And boy, the timing of this is really unfortunate because it's happening when we've really hit a tipping point in vaccination, where after months and months and months of such intense competition for scheduling slots at places like the Javits Center, now appointments are just sitting there. 6,000 appointments posted last night for Javits. And as of a few minutes ago, they're still almost all available, including 1,000 tomorrow. And you know that up until now, those would go in minutes, but it's not just Javits. The Armory in Washington Heights is now having a harder time filling it. And actually, you can get an appointment almost anywhere as soon as today or tomorrow, which on one hand is a great thing. It does reflect that we've expanded capacity. But on the other hand, the city is still only about 45% of people in Manhattan have been vaccinated. And so we have a lot more work to do. And what it's going to take now is really bringing vaccines to people and doing much more to build confidence in the vaccines. It's going to be about home-based vaccination, about mobile vaccination vans, about pop-up sites, even more in NYCHA community centers, in senior centers, in churches and houses of worship. We're going to have to do much, much more of that because the next group of people are willing to get vaccinated, but we need to make it comfortable and easy for them. And that's why the loss of J&J is so tough, because it was critical. And things like not just home-based vaccination, but also a lot of private doctors' offices had started vaccination with J&J, and that is a great way to reach people who are so comfortable with their doctor. I want to strongly echo a point the borough president made. Other parts of the country have been doing this with Moderna. They have put Moderna onto vans and gone around to neighborhoods. They have used EMS workers and taken Moderna into people's homes, even in rural areas where it's a lot more trouble to move around. So our message should be that we hope J&J comes back online soon, and I do actually think that probably will happen soon, at least for older individuals. But that either way, the work can't stop in doctors' offices, in people's homes, on mobile vans. I guess my final message for all of you is some of you as board leaders have done such good work in helping bring people to appointments, make appointments for people, and spread the word on this. And I just want to ask you now to redouble and triple that effort, because the next group of people we need to vaccinate are going to require that kind of intensive outreach. So boards really need to kick it into high gear in communicating and supporting and helping bring vaccinations to people, to bring people to vaccination. So that's my single message for you this morning. Apologies again for being in and out of the meeting. It's just been a busy day. But thank you all so much for everything you're doing. And thank you, Borough President.
Thank you. Rosie?
Hello. Thank you, Councilmember Levine. Unfortunately, Rosie got kicked off there for a bit, but thank you so much for sharing your report. I think that's all we've got now. All right. So can we have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
And that second was Tammy, I believe. Great, awesome. Well, thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.